You can draw this in Procreate. I'm going to show you exactly how you can make this super awesome poster-like illustration in Procreate on your iPad. I will take you through all the steps so you will end up with an amazing result. All you need is the app Procreate, of course, on your iPad, and the color palette that I have linked in the description. It's totally free. And we're working on a canvas that is 2,300 pixels by 3,000 pixels. So if you're ready, let's get started. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to change our background color. We will go to the layer menu, the two little squares, and then tap background color and pick this third color in our color palette. And then on this layer, on layer 1, we are going to create a rectangle. And for the brush, I want to use the round chalk pencil, which is part of the treasure chest brush pack. If you don't already have it, it's completely free. It contains a super big amount of brushes, and you can find it by going to freefromflow.com and you'll get it for free. So we'll use the round chalk pencil, and for the color, we will use the second color. Now I have the opacity of this brush set to 100% and the size is at 70. And we will just go along the sides. Let's start about here. Make a line going up, and it can be wobbly. It's just about like where you stop. And we'll go down to about here, and then we will close this shape like this. And then just hold your pen in place, and it'll turn into a rectangular shape like this. And you could even go to rectangle here at the top if you want to pull some corners, make it bigger or smaller. Super handy. So let's go for something like this. And then I want to fill this with color, but since it's a little bit textured, your color might spill all over. So what we are going to do, we will drag in our colored circle and then slide to the left or right until it doesn't spill. You see threshold there at the top. So let's go to about here, and then it doesn't spill. And then you could go in, you could go over the edge a bit to make it more opaque, to get rid of some of the like texture here. But you could also go to the layer menu and duplicate the layer and then pinch it together. And then you might want to do that again. And that will also get rid of any little gaps there. Maybe you have just a few, but it'll help. Then it's time to start drawing. Let's tap the plus for a new layer on top. And let's set this layer to clipping mask so that whatever we draw here, it won't go outside of the shape that we have here. And for the color, I want to use the fifth color, the pink. And I want to use this to create some clouds. But first, let's make a horizontal line about here. And you can hold your pen in place and tap one finger on the screen to make sure that it's perfectly horizontal. And then let's go here and let's make these shapes. Maybe we could go even a bit higher. So we'll just make these wobbles and we'll go down in the center. And then we'll go up again. So we get something like this. And then we can color that in. We could just close the shape on the sides. Let me make it a bit more tidy. Close it on the sides like this. And then we could drag in the color again and use that threshold. And then we can dive in and adjust those edges. We could also make the brush a bit bigger, maybe like 100%. And then we can just go along those edges, maybe make the clouds even bigger. This way we can tidy it up a little bit, but it doesn't have to be too tidy. So don't worry about it too much. I just want to get rid of some of those chunky parts. And then on top of this, I want to create two little islands. So let's tap the plus for another layer. And again, let's set this to clipping mask, so it won't go outside of our rectangular shape. And then let's pick the first color. And then we'll start our little island about here. Let's make like a wavy shape to the right. And then here we'll make a horizontal line again. Tap one finger on the screen so that it's perfectly horizontal. And let's make a smaller one over here. Then a horizontal line, closing the shape. And then we can drag in the color. And then we can go in and go over that edge a little bit. And that's the downside with a brush like this when it's textured, that you get these gaps when filling, but I really like the outer edge and how textured it is. So we'll just deal with it. Let's zoom out a little so we can see the edges. And now let's go to our sun shape. Let's make that on a layer on top of the others. Let's tap the plus, and for the color, we'll go to the fourth color. And I want to use a special tool here. Let's go to the wrench and then to canvas. Then we'll turn on drawing guide and tap edit drawing guide. And then we'll go to symmetry, then tap options and turn on radial and also rotational symmetry. Now we can use this blue dot to move this guide around, and let's imagine where the center of our sun will be. I want it to be nicely centered, like in the horizontal center, but a little bit higher, perhaps about here. And then let's tap the little check mark here. And now when you go to your layer, you'll see assisted underneath the layer name. That means that we can use this guide, and when you start drawing, you see that you have that rotational symmetry. Now let's make the brush a little bit smaller. Let's start at 70%. And let's first make a circle for our sun. We can just color it in. Maybe a little bit bigger. And then let's dive in a little bit. Let's make the brush even smaller. Let's set it to 30% to start making those sun rays. I want it to be a bit like this. And now we need room for another one over here. So again, we'll make a twisting shape. You might need a few tries, that's okay. And then we'll connect it to the next one. So something like this. Now you can go over a few times, adjust it a little bit if needed. But with just a few strokes, you have an entire sun, and you can color it in like this. Super handy tool. And it also feels a little bit like magical. I can imagine spending hours with this tool if I was a kid. It's just so much fun to see all the sides like appearing at the same time. So we got some nice sun rays. Yeah, perfect. So now we don't need this symmetry tool, this grid anymore. So we can go to the wrench, we can turn off the drawing guide. But when you look at the layer, assisted is still turned on, so it's still working. If you want to turn that off, you can just tap the layer and turn off drawing assist. Now on this layer, we can add some more stuff. We can add some clouds, for instance. Let's just make a simple cloud shape. something like this, and then make the lower part straight. And again, we can just use the quick shape tool. Let's go in here. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger, perhaps 70%. Makes it a bit easier to fill this in. Just a simple looking cloud that fits the style of this illustration. It would look weird if we would add realistic clouds here. So another one over here, just some of these bumps, and then make the underside straight, and then color it in. Like this. And I also want to add a wave in this scene. So let's create like the foamy top of that wave here by just creating another sort of a cloud shape actually. So that's that wavy, foamy top. Make a nice big shape. Yeah, it's really almost like a cloud. And now we can go below. We could go to this layer and then just remove a part of this layer so we can see some blue. You could do that by tapping the layer and then tapping mask. And then on this layer mask, we can paint with black. We can double tap here to pick black. And now we can mask parts of this layer. So we can make a curve here and here, and then we can just color this in to create our wave. And then we can go back to this layer again with our white, and then we can add some lines here. Just some curves that follow like the imaginary shape of our wave. And let's also switch to that blue to the second color. Let's make the brush smaller, 30%. And let's add some lines to the top. Almost looks like a happy face. Just some little curves. For some extra texture. Now let's work on some trees. And for the trees, it's a bit more of like a complicated shape. So what can be handy is to create a little sketch before you start creating these. So let's go to this layer and then tap the plus for a new layer on top. And then to sketch, what shall we use? Well, you can go to any of the pencils that are already in Procreate. And perhaps the Bruni brush will be nice. We can just pick black. Let's check the size. Well, that's looking good. Opacity is at 100, size at 50. And let's create a tree over here. Let's just make a line up. And I will imagine the leaves by just creating these curves. This is just the start, a starting point for our tree. So we have a bit of like a broader trunk, and then for the leaves, you can make shapes like this, using that line that we have just created as a guide. And it's also like the the top of the leaf. And it doesn't have to be super delicate or tidy, because that's just the style of this illustration. It could be a little bit funky. So more of these curved lines for another tree. And then again, the undersides can make the stem a little bit broader. Something like this. Now you can use this as a guide. We can lower the opacity a little bit of this to like 30% or 31, whatever. And then let's make another layer by tapping the plus. And to make these nice and crisp, I want to use the selection tool. You can go to the S shape ribbon, set it to freehand with color filter on, and set the color to our first color here. I hope you're having fun so far creating this stylized illustration. I'm really inspired by retro style illustrations lately with lots of texture and simple color palettes. If you like this as well, then I think you'll like my recent tutorial at Patreon, in which we are drawing this lady with a cat. But of course, that's not the only tutorial that I have at Patreon. I actually have more than 250 Procreate drawing and painting tutorials over there. So I'm sure there's something that you'll like, and it's also the perfect place to level up your Procreate skills. So it would be great to see you there. I will just leave a link for you down in the description so you can find it, and then perhaps I'll find you there. But now let's continue. And now we can simply make a selection. We can follow our shape, our sketch. You don't have to follow your sketch exactly. You can create these nice pointy parts for your leaves this way. And it's hard to get that with a brush. You'll always have a bit of a rounded pointy part. So this will make it nice and crisp. And you can rotate your canvas to make it easier to create these curves. And then go down, close the shape, and then you'll see that it fills with color. So we have a nice tree over here. You could go out and back in to work on the other one and just repeat the process. So again, first the stem, some nice pointy leaves, and sometimes you can add some more of those pointy parts. Your sketch is just a little guide. Then the other side. And then this one. All the way down, closing the shape, and then we have two palm trees. To make them match a bit better with the rest, you could just use your brush, the round chalk pencil, add a bit of a smaller size, like 30%, and then you can go in there and add some more texture to the edges. And you don't have to go along all the edges. because you don't want to get rid of the, well, like I said, those pointy parts. But you can go over a few areas just to make it match the style. At this point, of course, you can also get rid of that sketch that you made. You can just slide to the left, tap delete, and then go back to your palm trees. We don't need a guide anymore. And this one. And let's do the same for the other tree. Adding a little bit of texture to the edges. This one. And then finally this one. Looking good. Now we can just merge this with this layer with our little islands like this. Then let's pick this fourth color and let's go back to this layer. So on this layer we can add some extras to these hills. I'd like to add some lines just for some extra interest. Maybe a little bit wobbly to make these look like some rocks. Also on this side, just a few. Maybe another one here. And let's also add some waves to the scene. Let's make our brush bigger, set it to 70%, and then go to the wrench and turn on the drawing guide again. Go to Edit Drawing Guide, and this time set it to the 2D grid. And I just want to use this as a guide to make it easier to create those waves. And when you go to your layer menu, you'll see that it's not assisted right now. And we don't need assisted because we want some nice waves. Let's rotate our canvas a little bit. And of course, we don't want to go outside of the shape. So let's just set this layer to clipping mask as well. And we can use these lines that we're seeing as a guide. I want to go a little bit higher actually. So we can have the tips, in this case, touch one of those lines, but perhaps it looks a bit different for you, but it can be helpful so that your waves will be like not horizontal, but they'll follow that horizontal line. Otherwise, you might go down on one side, have some wonky waves. And you don't have to make them all the same size. Try to vary a bit. And then one more at the bottom. Almost there. Yes, that looks lovely. Now we can turn that drawing grid off again by going to Canvas and then turning off the drawing guide. And now I want to go to that pink layer over here, to that layer mask, because I want to add some detail to the clouds. Let's set the size of the brush to 30% again. And we can add some of these wobbles just to add some more a cloud effect. I think that's nice. Maybe over here. Maybe another one here, just a small one. That's just a nice extra little touch. Now it's time to add a face to our sun. And this reminds me a bit actually of the clock that my parents used to have with this moon face. We're going to add a face to this where we will tap the plus for a new layer. And then we will pick this first color again. And we'll stick with this brush. So let's go to the wrench, then turn on drawing guide, then go to edit drawing guide, then go to symmetry again, then go to options and set it to vertical. Also, make sure that you turn off rotational symmetry. Otherwise, weird things will happen. So vertical, rotational symmetry turned off, and then use the check mark. And now when you go to your layer, you'll see that it's assisted again. And now let's go in and let's create a nose like this. And then 2 eyebrows. So a very simple nose with a nostril like this. Then for the eyes, we'll just make a shape like this. And add a pupil with a little highlight. And then a line on top. Maybe a little bit higher. And then for the mouth, we'll make a smile with lips like this. And 2 round cheeks. We can fill it in like this. And a little chin. Yeah, I like it. Then let's go to the wrench again, turn off that drawing guide. We don't need to see that line. And then finally, I want to add some texture to this piece. So let's go and let's group these layers. Let's slide to the right on all of these layers, then tap group, then just close the group like this and slide to the left, tap duplicate. This is just so we have a backup. And then let's turn off this bottom layer. Then for the top layer, use flatten. This is why I'm using a backup over here, because now it's flattened and then you won't be able to adjust any of the layers anymore. So if you want to go back, you still have that group. Now tap this layer and add a mask. And then for the brush, we will go to the grunge brushes and use the motorsport brush. And make sure you have it set to black. And you can make it a bit bigger, maybe 30%. Opacity is at 100, but you can definitely play around with the size. And then just go over. And what I actually want is for this texture to be light. So what we need to do is we need to duplicate this layer again, slide to the left, tap duplicate. And for this bottom one, make sure that you remove the mask. Then tap this layer and use alpha lock. Then go to the colors, pick the 4th one, go back to the layer menu, tap the layer and use fill layer. Now we have a light, almost white version, so that when we mask on this layer, everything will end up looking light. So that's better. Now, I have removed way too much, of course, with this brush. So let's go back to our motorsport brush and then set the color to white. And yeah, you can just do that by double tapping here. And then we'll just go over again to make the texture way more subtle. And you can also play around with the size of your brush, make it smaller, like 15%, if you don't want to get rid of too much. And of course, if you feel like you have removed too much, you can always switch back to black and add more texture again. I think something like this looks good. And now we can just pinch it to make it fill the screen, use 4 fingers to admire our work, and call it finished. Don't forget to share your results. I would love to see it, and I would love to see you next time for the next tutorial.